Why you should always use a release agreement with your podcast guests. I call it Safe Guest. Well, welcome to another episode of Legit Podcast Pro. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and I help creatives and business people in the podcasting industry cover their legal bases and protect themselves and the things they create. And this is my short format weekly show where I offer legal tips, information, and strategies and answer your questions so you can grow your podcast like a pro. This episode of Legit Podcast Pro is brought to you by my free workshop coming up on October 17th. It's called Business and Legal Fundamentals for Podcast Growth and Profit. And you can register right now by visiting event.podcastlaw.net. Come on over to event.podcastlaw.net and join us. All right, so I am on a bit of a crusade. You see, it's a mission to help 10,000 or more podcasters, video creators, live streamers, and other media makers to protect themselves and grow their audiences and businesses by being as professional in their approach as possible. And one of the ways that you need to be professional is papering the deals, getting things in writing, and so on. Unfortunately, I see it far too often. Podcaster just sort of casually invites a guest to be on the show. They do the recording, everything's going good, and then some months or even years later, the guest decides that for whatever reason, I don't like you anymore. I don't like what was done on that show. I don't want that out there anymore. And they ask for you to take it down. Or worse yet, someone comes along and claims, defamation or invasions of privacy or you didn't have my permission or so on. And so that's why I want us to do this every single time. Get it in writing, get something down. So I call it a podcast release. What is a release? Well, it's really just a simple agreement designed to protect the podcaster's investment of time, energy, resources, and money. And what it does is it gives consent to the podcaster to record the session, the interview, and so on. Now, I know a lot of people out there are going to say, but I live in a one-party state. I don't need any permission to record it. And that is true if you're talking about the criminal wiretap statutes. Recording a confidential conversation is illegal in some places where you have, unless you have both parties' signature or whatever. But the recording of the conversation is only one part of what you're getting a release to cover. And I think that really the criminal wiretap statutes are a bit of a red herring, because that doesn't mean that a person has no expectation of privacy and no expectation that they're not being recorded unless you tell them and ask them. So for criminal purposes, you can't be held liable for recording someone in a one-party state, but maybe someone is in a two-party state, and that becomes an issue. But more importantly, on the civil side, the wiretap statute doesn't do anything in that regard. So it gives you consent to record the session. It gives you consent to publish it, which is not automatically covered under the one-party or two-party state stuff either. You need permission in order to publish a person's performance and recording with you in order to avoid some of the kinds of privacy and publicity claims that we sometimes see. It also gives you permission to use the recording in any and all media, not just the podcast, but maybe some years down the line, you're going to decide to transcribe everything and turn it into a book, or incorporate some of the quotes or important lessons from the episodes into, an online course or some other kind of a product. The consent to use it in all media gets you covered there. And it provides you a warranty of ownership and originality. That is a promise, essentially, that this is not going to infringe on any other person's rights. So if you have a guest come on and they start reciting poetry, it better be their own poetry. If they start, quoting lyrics from songs and things like that, you still have an obligation to be mindful and thoughtful about those kinds of things. But it's a reminder to the guest at the time they're signing the thing, hey, we expect you to bring, good, clean stuff that we can use without any other clearances and so on. It's also going to say, the release is going to say, you, the guest, don't have any right to any special compensation. And finally, it's going to include the guest's promise not to sue and to waive any and all kinds of claims against the podcaster or the network or the sponsors of the show. And that's an important factor. The sponsors benefit from the existence of the release as well. And yes, it's a one-sided document, very much so. I see a lot of people on Facebook groups and in social media railing against, oh, it's such a one-sided contract. That's not fair. Well, hey, have you ever signed up for a cell phone? Ever signed a contract with a bank? It's a one-sided contract, I promise. Anyway, here, it's not that one-sided because the guest is in fact getting a benefit of the bargain. They're getting exposure and visibility. And yeah, I know that's not always, that important. They're getting an endorsement of their ideas and their business and the opportunity to get their message out and increase their impact. That media exposure is valuable. And so the release is part of the deal. Hey, you want to get your message out to my audience? I will let you do that as long as you let me use it in certain ways and that I don't have to take it down later and those kinds of things. So how do you implement the guest release? Well, you can obviously send them either a hard copy or a PDF to sign and send back to you. You could use one of those e-signature services like DigiSigner or HelloSign or e-signature service, whatever. Or you could just put it on a web form. I like to do it when the guest is signing up to book a time slot using my calendar tool. I actually have the form, the language of the agreement in the form that they are completing, and they check a box that says, yes, I've read the above, and by proceeding and clicking submit, they're agreeing to those terms. That is binding and legal in every state in the country and most places around the world. So one other objection that I often hear to these kinds of things is that, hey, I came out of radio. I've been doing this for a long time. I've never had to get a release ever before. The fact of it is, podcasting is different from traditional broadcasting. It's a different medium, so there are different rules. That's true not just in this issue about the releases, but have you ever tried to use a piece of music in a podcast? Broadcast radio has the blanket licenses from ASCAP and BMI. Those don't work for podcasting. You need to get different permission because of the way the medium is made, transmitted, and stored. Broadcasts are ephemeral. They come, they go, they're gone. Yeah, there's an air check recording sitting somewhere and so on, but people aren't going to, once it's over, it's over. They're not hearing that. Podcasts, on the other hand, are evergreen. They will be around forever, or at least as long as the podcast company is paying for a hosting service to persist, or using a free hosting service or whatever. And the fact of it is, radio stations have staffs of lawyers, or they have lawyers on retainer. You probably don't. So you shouldn't be taking the same kinds of chances that big radio does. Oh, and most lawyers that I know that represent radio stations, they do prefer that guests sign some kind of release, even if the jocks and the hosts don't want to be bothered. Here, you're the owner of the station, essentially. You need to protect yourself. So don't just do things the way you'd always have in radio, because it's a different medium, a different business structure, a different model. And so the rules are going to be different. Now, I just want to mention that this show is brought to you by the free Legit Podcast Pro community, where we help each other grow and prosper with our podcasting ventures. And you can join now by visiting legitpodcastpro.com. Let me see if I can find that. I don't know. Oh, I want to tell you about the podcast release. If you want to get a sample podcast release to use with your guests, head on over to podcastrelease.com. It's absolutely free. Check it out and use it in good health. But please use it all the time, every single time. That's what's important. All right. One more thing I want to just bring back to you, remind you, the workshop is coming up Monday, October 17th at 9 a.m. Pacific time. It's called Business and Legal Fundamentals for Podcast Growth and Profit. And I would love it if you would join by visiting the... I should put this on the screen. I don't have it ready, but you can register by going to event.podcastlaw.net. Event.podcastlaw.net. I'll make sure I put that in the comments behind there. Oh, there we are. Hello. And let's come back to our main shot here for just a quick sign off. Hey, do me a favor. If this kind of material is useful to you, subscribe and like the video. And don't forget, the episode is brought to you by that free workshop coming up October 17th, Business and Legal Fundamentals for Podcast Growth and Profit. I am going to put it up on the screen right now. It's event. event at podcastlaw.net. Head on over there, check it out, and register so you can get in on this workshop. It's a Zoom call. We're going to be talking and answering questions and working stuff out. It's not just your plain boring old webinar format. So we'll have a good time with it, and that's going to do it. So do subscribe, like, and share if you like what we're doing here. And that's it for today. I'll see you again next time on Legit Podcast Pro. Have a great day.